Hello again. Okay, so a few weeks ago, 3 or 4, I'm not sure exactly, someone posted on Twitter, it went viral, something to the effect of 100 men could kill a gorilla if they were really dedicated. Like I said, it went viral, everyone wanted to comment on it, so I decided I'm going to comment on it. Start with, haven't actually seen the post itself. I heard about it. There's a guy who I watched some of his stuff, Carl Benjamin. He's from United Kingdom. Um, does political and social commentary and cultural stuff, and so he weighed in on this as more a lighthearted thing. And the guy's educated. I like him. I like most of his stuff. So he actually researched this a little bit, and he looked up other videos. So he commented on other videos, so some of what I'm going to comment on is him commenting on, you know, third person commentary going on here. And after I saw his video on it, one more video popped up, so I watched that. Uh, and I'm going to talk about it first, just because the guy who made it was sort of stupid, in my opinion, but he does bring up an interesting point, or he raises an interesting issue. He doesn't bring it up. In fact, he ignores it completely, but it does raise an interesting issue. So the second video I saw, the guy's argument was a leopard can kill a gorilla, and a man can kill a leopard, therefore a man can kill a gorilla. You know, law of transitory killing. Um, Partly agree with that. My biggest problem with that is he doesn't say how big was the leopard, how big was the gorilla, how big was the man. A full-sized leopard can kill an adolescent gorilla. Sure, I believe that. Could a full-sized leopard kill a full-sized gorilla? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, so saying, "Oh, I saw a video of this," doesn't answer all the questions that are needed. So, like I said, that was a bad argument. And again, transitory killing isn't an actual rule of life or anything. So, just because we can kill the leopard and the leopard can kill the gorilla doesn't mean we can kill the gorilla. But it does raise the interesting question of, like I said, how big are the things being fought? Because that seems to be the main brunt of some of these arguments is yes, 100 Marines could kill a gorilla. Probably. They're trained, they're supposed to stay in shape, as opposed to 100 random people on the street. Could they kill a gorilla? And maybe. Again, so I'm going to go back now to Carl Benjamin's video as he's commenting on it. And so his big argument is we're smarter than the gorilla, so we can actually plan. And he comes up with a fairly good plan. Instead of just running in and beating on the gorilla, which apparently most of the people are talking about, because that wouldn't work, he says we surround the gorilla, big, 10 foot, 12-foot radius circle around it, and then the guy behind it runs in, taps it, runs out again. And the idea is we're going to confuse the gorilla and wear it out. And he talked, yes, gorillas are much stronger than humans. They can be faster, but they can't keep up those speeds for long times. And they do wear out faster than humans, generally. So his argument is if we can just keep it busy long enough that it wears out, we can do this. And I would agree with that to a point. Now, some of the arguments going, and yeah, he actually quoted a few primatologists. I don't know if that's a word. I think I've heard it before. experts in apes. And they say things like, okay, supposedly of the great apes, gorillas are the least intelligent, supposedly. Don't know how they rule that. Uh, and yeah, they are strong and they are fast, but they don't have a lot of stamina. So, yeah, the head primate, experts in apes, experts in gorillas have agreed that we do have some advantages over gorillas, even though they're stronger than us. Now then, the one thing Carl gets wrong. I'm going to call him Carl from time to time. Never met the guy. I like his stuff. Not his friend though, but just for brevity, I'm going to call him Carl from time to time. He keeps making statements like, "Yeah, sure, the gorilla's strong enough that it can rip us in half." That's not how gorillas fight. I mean, so he did do some research, but then he makes these statements which makes it sound like all his information is coming from King Kong films. So I got that against you, Carl. He also goes on about this plan of making a big circle around the gorilla. It's just a matter of if we can get enough people to pin it down, then the other people can punch it or kick it or whatever. That would work. And then he makes the comment, yes, we should be able to hold it down because gorillas have like 5 foot long arms, so we can get enough people on each arm to hold it down, which also makes sense. But back to his original plan of we surround the gorilla and a guy runs in behind it and tags it and runs back out. The gorilla doesn't have to hurt the guy. It just has to turn quick enough that it can hit him, and it's got these 5 foot long arms, so it might be able to, and disorient the guy. That is one of the big arguments. So one of the arguments going on was, or against this was, gorilla's going to kill someone, people are going to run away. Which in reality, yes. However, the original proposition was we can do this if we're determined. And so determined means even if I see someone die, I'm still going to keep fighting. This is something Carl points out, and this is part of the argument. I'm going to get to determined later, but I'm bringing it up now because being determined does not negate being disoriented. So I run in, I hit it from behind. As I'm going back out, gorilla turns around and manages to tag me. Isn't necessarily hurting me, but if he hits hard enough, I'm going to be disoriented. And once I'm disoriented, how much? 10 to 15 seconds? I'm in other people's way. So the big plan we have of surrounding them and running in and roaring them out, I'm actually negating that. And you can't just say, but if you're determined, no. Determination does not trump disorientation. A determined person, if they're disoriented, can still follow up the plan. So we're just going to amend Carl's plan here. We have people running in and tagging the gorilla and running out again. For every guy who runs in, we got 1 or 2 ready to grab him and pull him out and push him beyond the circle if he gets hit. That way the disoriented people are out of the way. And takes him a minute or 2 to recover, he joins us back and we keep fighting. That would work. But, we just have to have it planned in advance because it's something we have to consider. Now then, one video he comments on rugby fan. And the guy talks about there's one rugby player. The guy's practically a tank. Almost impossible to stop. He's had like 3 or 4 people grabbing onto him, and he keeps going. However, if like the entire team is able, opposing team is able to tackle him, they can bring him down. And the guy who made that video sort of tried to extrapolate on it, and okay, so this guy is maybe 1/5 as strong as a gorilla, but the rest of the rugby team is, you know, more than 5 times the size of a normal rugby team. So, or 100 people is more than 5 times the size of a normal rugby team, I should say. So, even though the gorilla is stronger than this guy, we can still get enough people to bring him down. Possible. But, and this is, are we guaranteed to have a rugby team? And this is one thing, Carl does bring up. Are we, do we get to pick and choose? And this goes back to the whole leopard gorilla man thing. Do we get to pick and choose which gorilla, which man, which. Everyone's presuming that it is a very strong adult, fully healthy gorilla able to defend itself in the wild. If that's the case, then why can't we pick and choose our 100 men and pick the healthiest, strongest men, best coordinated? Or if we're going to save random men, then we also got to save random gorilla. And then, yeah, that brings up another point of, can we do it or not? Depends on the gorilla. So, I mean, that's one point of it, and Carl Benjamin, he says, we aren't necessarily going to have a rugby team or rugby team level players doing this. Or I gave the example of Marines earlier. We aren't necessarily going to have those, but we aren't necessarily going to have the strongest gorilla either. So, I mean, that argument sort of falls through. If we're allowed to pick the gorilla, we should also be allowed to pick the men. So there is some randomness to this. Now, we go into the whole concept of determination. I want 100 or 99 determined people to come help me fight this gorilla. I'm with you. Yeah, let's go get him. Determination, and a large part of this argument is, determination is a fixed thing. There is no, people say, well, someone's going to see someone die and then they're going to run away. No, if you're determined, you will keep fighting even if someone else dies. So, but how do you know you're determined? I mean, I am honest enough to say I would probably turn tail and run when I see the gorilla. I'll admit, I'm a coward. When it comes to fighting gorillas, at least. So, a bunch of people who say they're determined as opposed to a bunch of people who think they're determined are two different things. So yeah, let's go get the gorilla. And as we march down the street towards it, when we first see the gorilla, some of the people are going to become less determined than they thought they were. When we start fighting the gorilla and people start getting hit by it, people are going to be less determined than they were. And when I say that, I mean they weren't determined in the first place. So how do you tell that your 100 people are determined until you actually start fighting? And the answer there is you don't really. Like I said, Marines, you got some background. You've seen them fight. They've been trained for this. You can sort of guess maybe they are. Sports team. Let's be honest about it. Professional athletes are more talk than action sometimes. So, yeah, they could coordinate better and they might stick together and do it, but are they really determined or do they just think they are? Don't know. So that is one thing. So we get to, okay, let's suppose we have 100 determined people, but because we picked them randomly and we picked the gorilla randomly, the gorilla wins. Well, the people just weren't determined enough. That's the argument people would say. And we would keep falling back on this determination. No, the people were determined. They just weren't ready to fight the gorilla. They just weren't trained for it. They didn't plan for it. And that is one thing. Again, Carl Benjamin's plan, let's circle the gorilla, let's tag it, confuse it, wear it out, would work. most of the arguments, most of the little, because he did have the screen and screen videos of other people's arguments going up and showing people grouped around, punching stuff and stuff. It's that plan isn't going to work. You gotta think things through. So, um, and the problem with let's all mob the gorilla is there's a limited amount of space around a gorilla. It's maybe 10 to 12 people can actually reach it, and the others are just going to be standing in the background waiting for someone to fall away. Um, so the idea that we're going to have 100 people punching the gorilla all at once isn't going to happen. And that's what some of the people want to argue is, yeah, if everyone gets one punch in, well, everyone's not going to. So, last but, well, not last, not necessarily last. One thing, why are we fighting the gorilla? And this is one of those things. So the original statement, I don't know exactly what it was, but it sounds more like a drunken bar proposal. Hey guys, let's go fight a gorilla. Or it's just the way it's phrased. The way it's phrased. I don't have an exact quote on it, but the way I heard it phrased, it's like, come on guys, 100 of us could fight a gorilla if we're really determined. So it sounds more like a spontaneous, we're not picking a select group, we're just going to go out and fight a gorilla, which brings us back to the determination thing, because yeah, people are going to jump in on that when they really aren't thinking about it. So the entire situation itself is a little on the ridiculous side. Why are we fighting the gorilla? I mean, even if I could, suppose I'm twice as strong as a gorilla, twice as fast, I could easily beat one. Why would I fight a gorilla? I wouldn't. I'm not a jerk. Unless something happens. Sometimes wild animals will go on a rampage and they will have to be put down. So in a case like that, okay, yeah, I might go out and kill the gorilla if other lives are in danger. Again, Carl Benjamin came out with the argument. That's sort of he brought that up as part of his determination argument. Supposing aliens said we're going to destroy the Earth if you don't kill the gorilla, then we really have no choice. Might as well try to kill the gorilla. Makes sense. Because we know even if you see someone else die, even if you get hurt, you know that you're going to die anyway if you fail. So you might as well keep fighting. Even if I die, I'm saving other people. So yeah, that's one thing people might do it. But even then, you're going to have people whose quote unquote determination isn't as real as they believe it is. So we can always go back to the how determined are you? Or what is determination? Or how do we describe determination? And we're always going to find people lacking. And then there's the idea that the gorilla doesn't have to kill you. Again, Carl Benjamin mentioned, a gorilla can tear you in half, which he probably can, but that's not the way gorillas fight. All he has to do is hit you hard enough to wound you a lot. I watched videos, or I looked up videos of gorillas fighting. Let's put it that way, because trying to find those, one, you're going to find a certain amount of AI generated stuff. Found a video of a gorilla fighting a lion, but you watch it and the gorilla has a long tail, which means that's probably AI generated and not real. Then there were a lot of like National Geographics and confrontation between two gorillas. And the confrontation is more social than physical. They circle each other and one of them backs off, or one of them chases the other away. They never actually get into fighting. So it's more realistic, but not enough to get information. So the ones where I actually got to see gorillas fighting, again, they don't rip people in half. A lot of it is they go at each other, arms windmilling at each other, trying to hit them. and then they try to get him in a body, you know, hug him basically, bear hug. That's what I was looking at. Um, and people keep bringing up, oh, the biting force of a gorilla is so many pounds per square inch and all that. They really don't bite until, if they get the guy in a bear hug, then they might try to bite him. Other than that, they really aren't trying to. Uh, some gorillas have claws, but they aren't really using them to fight. They're pounding at the other guy. And I bring this up because, like I said, it only has to hurt you. And this whole overhand stuff, he doesn't have to kill you. He could break your collarbone. And okay, I'm determined. I will still continue to try to fight because, aliens will blow up the planet if we don't. But even if I'm determined, that doesn't mean that I'm capable of it. So my punches are going to be landing a little hard, less hard. My aim is going to be off. My ability to dodge is going to be off. I'm going to be disoriented again. So just getting a few hits in is all the gorilla. It doesn't have to kill you. It just has to wound you enough that you become less effective. Get bear hugged by gorilla, you can have ribs broken. And yes, you can continue to fight if you're determined, but your effectiveness is going to drop greatly. And so that's one thing, is the gorilla going to concentrate on one person and try to kill him, then concentrate on the next and try to kill him? Or is he just going to be throwing people around and wounding them enough that they can't fight back? And my answer there is probably the second one. So that actually gives it more advantage than people give it credit for. And again, that's the way, even when they're angry, they seem to fight that way. So the idea that, we might chase them away, don't know. One thing Carl brought up was the idea of, do we have to kill the gorilla? What if it runs away? Which is a good question because, again, watching the whole social interaction between gorillas, they try to avoid a fight when possible. When they're greatly outnumbered, they try to avoid. 100 men charging a gorilla, even though he could easily beat any one of them, he's probably running from the group. They as individuals look weaker, but gorillas aren't so stupid as to try to take on 100 people. Unless, again, we go back to, is he in a blind fury of some sort? So now the question is, if we have to kill it and it's running away, how does our plan work? Our containment circle, it can break through that, probably. Once it does, we have to chase it down. We have to try to tackle it, which we did we train for coordinated tackling? One or two people aren't going to tackle a gorilla. 100, if we can get all of them to pile up on him, sure, 100 could do it. But it would have to be a coordinated tackle. Did we train for that? And last but not least on Carl's commentary is he said probably with his plan, maybe 20 could do it. He did speculate 10 could do it, but I doubt that. 20, I would agree. Again, if the 20 were really well trained, sticking to the plan, and determined, truly determined, not just thinking they're determined, they probably could. If they could catch the gorilla. If the gorilla doesn't run away, which again, a gorilla wouldn't want to fight 20 people necessarily. It would have to be in a blind fury. So, that's my thoughts on that. Now, why did I decide to do this? Since there are so many videos on this, why did I decide to bring it up? And largely, I'm looking at it more along the lines of the psychology of the people making the arguments. They say we're grabbing onto the word determined, and yes, if the people are truly determined, they could do it. But how do you tell if someone's truly determined until the fight actually starts? So there's the idea of how much time do you have to plan, And like I said, the guy who originally made the proposition, the way it was phrased, it sounded more like a spontaneous, "Hey guys, I bet we could do this." The way he phrased it, he might not have been thinking it, but that's the way it seemed to be phrased. Why would we fight in the first place? Why are we fighting a gorilla in the first place? Um, Questions like that. So that's sort of what I was looking at mostly. Um, so it's my final conclusion on that part is it's really a ridiculous question to begin with. In reality, unless we somehow have a raging gorilla running loose in an area where there is 100 determined people nearby, it's not going to come up. Um, and of course, there is always the issue I also brought up. Even if the people fail, are we going to turn around and say, well, they just weren't determined enough? Or are we going to say, well, maybe those people were just too weak? Yeah. So, because people throughout these arguments, they continue to use the, well, he said determined, therefore it can be done. No, he said determined, that just means we're not going to run away. Doesn't mean that we aren't going to be hindered by the gorilla. Doesn't mean that we're going to win. It just means we're going to keep fighting until one of us wins, either the gorilla or us, and maybe the gorilla will be the one. Just because we lose, as long as we kept fighting until the end, we were determined. We were just losing as determined. So you can't just yell, well, yeah, they lost because they weren't determined enough. If they were determined, they would have been punching harder. If they were determined, they would. No, you can't make that argument. Because if they were determined, determination got them into the fight and got them to stay there. It didn't make them better fighters necessarily. That's it. Like I said, that's just a little something that came up. Uh, Wanted to cover a few aspects what I don't think other people did. And like I said, the plan could work, but there are one or two flaws that I've decided to add on to because again, people being disoriented, you gotta account for that. People getting wounded, to the point where they're less effective fighters, you gotta account for that. But other than that, taking him down to 10 or 20 fighters, the plan might fail because just one person gets hurt, suddenly you're at a greater disadvantage. Whereas 100 people, you can afford for some people to get hurt. That's it. Honestly, if it were up to me, I'd say just don't fight gorillas unless aliens force you to. But that's it. Have a nice day.